Coming up on this edition of the Black Vault Radio, John Burroughs, retired serviceman from the United States Air Force, steps into the vault. He joins me to recount a bizarre UFO encounter which occurred on December 26, 1980, just outside of RAF Bentwaters. It is known as the Rendlesham Forest Incident. He also explains how this event may have caused lifelong health issues that he continues to battle to this day.
They knew what the symptoms were, AFib, congestive heart failure, but what was going on didn't match the symptoms. I did the request, put everything in and everything, and 3 months go by and I get a letter saying, "Thank you for withdrawing your appeal, the case is closed." It's like, what? So we started going into the forest towards the area where we thought the light was. Well, for me, it was just boom, boom, and it was over. So it was like I said, I remember him yelling to open up on it, and then it seemed like it just, was up and gone.
All that and much more. So stay tuned. The Black Vault Radio is about to begin. More than 20 years ago, I began a journey. My quest for the truth. My name is John Greenewald, and I have hammered the United States government with Freedom of Information Act requests trying to get answers. I have more than 2 million pages of declassified documents for you to download at theblackvault.com. Now, I attempt to dive even deeper and talk to some of the most brilliant minds on this planet. No government secret is off limits, and no question is off the table. All I aim for is the truth. This is the Black Vault Radio. That's right, everybody. This is the Black Vault Radio. I am your host, John Greenewald Jr. As always, thank you so much for tuning in and making this your podcast and radio show of choice. I know that there are a ton of options out there, so I do appreciate you tuning in at least for the next hour and 50 minutes or so. Looking forward to today's show. I'm bringing on John Burroughs. Now, the tides have kind of turned. I've been on John's show that he co-hosts with Linda Moulton Howe quite a few times now, and he and Linda have fired questions my way. Well, I am thankful for the opportunity to reverse those roles and fire some questions back at him. And he's going to be here talking about his experience at RAF Bentwaters, and that has definitely created quite a controversy as of late. There's a lot of controversy behind that case as a whole, but definitely in the last year or so, it is heightened. So I'm going to ask John all about his experience and what all of that means. Now, before we get to John, I want to update you on something. This was all just kind of by chance. It's a little bit of a coincidence. Now, last week I had Nick Pope on. It was a surprise episode because I'd already dropped an episode last week, and Nick and I did an extended interview, a conversation about ATIP, and what it is, what it was, what it's rumored to be, what it possibly is, what it isn't. And he and I had quite a few disagreements, but in a very respectful and friendly way. Nick and I have known each other for quite some time, and it was going into this, we both knew that we would not necessarily agree on everything. And that's why we wanted to do the show. It's an important dialogue to have. There's a lot of questions, some of which we can answer at this point, others we can't. Well, here's the update. If you haven't listened to that show, there is a small segment. We didn't spend a whole lot of time on it. It is kind of blown up in this entire debate about ATIP and the claims of Mr. Luis Elizondo, and that is the actual name of what ATIP stood for. Now, since nearly day one, a debate has raged on what the name of this, quote, Pentagon secret UFO study, at least as they touted it in the media, really was. Now, for quite some time, there's been a major discrepancy, which I've pointed out, of course, catching heat for asking that question by what I call a small circle of people that seem to really buy into most, if not everything, that Mr. Luis Elizondo has said without evidence. Now, he could absolutely be 100% right, but my school of thought has always been that we need supporting evidence. Last week on Nick's Pope Show, if you listen to the final thoughts, I really did liken it, and this may sound humorous, and it kind of is, but I simplified it and compared it to a puzzle being put together by my 5-year-old son. That you need pieces of the puzzle to get the whole picture. That you can take a piece out or maybe 2 pieces out of a 30-piece puzzle, but you can still tell the picture. That's research. That's challenging what we believe and what we know. And that's how I kind of simplified it in last week's episode. Well, here's the update. For that episode, before I got Nick onto the show, I really tried to get this answer, and it didn't come in time, and, well, as fate would have it, now I do. And it was addressing the name itself. Now, since the media had reported it both ways, it has stood as a standing debate. To some, again, this was very frustrating for me to ask, but it was something that needed to be answered. One side was wrong, whether it be the government, or namely in this specific instance, the Pentagon spokesman, or Mr. Luis Elizondo. The Pentagon has said and maintained it was the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. However, Mr. Elizondo said the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Now, as I think I said it with Nick anyway, or at least in quite a few interviews over the last year, I've never felt that this was the biggest red flag or the biggest discrepancy or the biggest question that needed answers, but it did need an answer nonetheless. Now, Nick and I didn't spend a whole lot of time on it because, again, there's much more important things to kind of address and ask, but it was brought up. Well, I finally got the answer from the Defense Intelligence Agency Public Affairs Office, and that came today on February 12th, 2019, the day that this episode dropped, and they do confirm that it is actually aerospace. So we finally have an answer to that. Now, I know that this will cause some who were frustrated at the question being asked to kind of feel vindicated here, that many other questions now don't matter, they're irrelevant because now the quote-unquote aerospace side won. Well, that's what's the problem with this debate is that there were sides. I think that so many people got caught up in the fact that asking a question was meaning that I was placing an accusation, or many others. There was a lot of people asking the question that I was placing the accusation or buying in fully to what the government was saying, and I never said that, even on this show. So I'm glad we got that answer. However, as this one question has been answered, many more have now arisen. It's with this reason alone that research really is key, and questions are crucial to understanding the bigger picture. Now, blind allegiance, what I call blind allegiance to one single source of information, is the absolute recipe for major letdowns and disaster. Now, I stand by asking the question and pushing for answers because in the process of doing so, more information has come to light. Research is sometimes slow and boring. I totally get it. But I ask questions until they're adequately answered, and I never really take that first document, that first answer that's given to me, whether it be by government or outside of government. In 22 years, hopefully I've proven that time and time again. But if not, I'm here to tell you that that's kind of how I operate. Now, on February 12th, again, that is today, the day that the episode dropped that you're listening to, the Defense Intelligence Agency answered multiple questions that I had submitted to them for clarification. But in the process of answering some, they've definitely brought up new ones. Now, what I've determined here, based on the answers that just came today, and this is fairly new information here, it's now confirmed that the DIA says that while the project was within their walls, and I'll explain that in a minute, it was called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. So we've answered that question. We can move on. It's also confirmed that by the DIA, that Bigelow Aerospace was actually the only bidder for the Advanced Aerospace Weapon System Application Program, or what we know as OSAP. If you know your ATIP history, it's been reported that OSAP was either the first program that led into the creation of ATIP, or it is the same program altogether. We don't really have a definitive answer there, but regardless, the DIA confirmed that Bigelow Aerospace was the only bidder. I don't know what that means. I'm really surprised to hear that. For well over a year now, I have had a FOIA request open for other contract bids. So I thought that there would be Bigelow Aerospace in addition to others, but no one bid on this contract that was actually posted publicly. I'm surprised by that, but that is what the DIA has confirmed. Now, I wanted to make sure I wasn't reading into it, and I did a follow-up message to them saying, hey, I just want to make sure you guys are saying no one else other than Bigelow Aerospace bid on the OSAP contract. They wrote back with a simple yes. The DIA is also not aware of any report or study produced outside the 38 reports listed in the attachments section of the letter to Senator John McCain and everyone else it was CC'd to. This contradicts the reporting that there's a 490-page study that was made under ATIP. Where is that? Now, I also have had for quite some time now a request for that 490-page study, but now the DIA is saying they're not aware of anything other than those 38 reports. Does that mean it doesn't exist? Of course not. That's not what I'm saying. But these are all pieces to the puzzle to unraveling this. It's also been determined that the approximate 5-year study that we know as ATIP, going from 2007 to approximately 2012, was actually determined that it was going to be canceled or moved out of the DIA within the first 24 months. In other words, not even halfway through the program, the DIA gave up on it. Now, this is pretty interesting because this actually supports, and I'm still kind of researching this document, the leaked George Knapp letter that I believe it's been confirmed by Senator Harry Reid that he wrote it, or possibly Senator Reid already admitted that he gave it to him. I'm not sure, and that could be very well known and obvious. So I'm sorry for not knowing that off the top of my head. But that particular letter, which I have no doubts to its legitimacy, now actually makes sense. That the DIA just said, hey, look, this is a waste. We're not finding anything. So when the funding that was slotted for a 5-year study runs out, or at that point ran out, it was done. The DIA was no longer going to do any type of research into this. That may be a clue into maybe this veered off into what that original contract solicitation was all about. I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy, but there's a reason why the DIA probably said, after 2 years here, there's 3 more years, let's just finish it out and call it quits. Well, that could all be a lie, but it is kind of confirmed by that Senator Harry Reid letter where he fought to keep that program alive and requested it to be a special access program, which ultimately was denied. So why would they give up on the program? That is still to be determined. I asked if the DIA had any knowledge if the program, known as ATIP, was moved, because they kept kind of punching the while it was here, and they even said, potentially moved out after 5 years. So I wanted to clarify, did they have any knowledge? And they said no. I think those answers are, obviously safe, because they may not be aware that, let's just say, on the off chance that ATIP was moved and or relaunched at, let's say, the Department of the Air Force, and they didn't know it, they're very, very careful, or at least they should be anyway, with giving those type of definitive statements. So they're just speaking for the DIA, and they say they have no knowledge. When I asked about UFOs specifically, they pretty much resorted to the very standard aerial threat research angle, not UFOs. I'll read the specific answer that he gave when I was asking about UFOs and ultimately the invisibility cloaks, wormholes, Drake equation research programs, or research reports, I should say, that were in there. Let me see. Here is his answer. The purpose of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program was to investigate foreign advanced aerospace weapon system applications with future technology projections over the next 40 years and to create a center of expertise on advanced aerospace technologies. The goal was to help understand the threat posed by unconventional or leap-ahead aerospace vehicles/technologies that could have national security implications for the United States. DIA awarded a contract to a sole bidder who identified and worked with academics and scientists to produce 38 technical reports. The contract goal was to study 12 technical areas: lift, propulsion, control, armament, signatures reduction, materials, configuration, power generation, temporal translation, human effects, human interface, and technology integration. That was it. When I had specifically again asked about UFOs, he said revert to that answer, which was in regards to invisibility cloaks, wormholes, and Drake equations. So they kind of combined that answer into two of my questions. Nothing about UFOs. That then begs to answer, now that we've got, we're done with the name debate, the biggest question, I think, more than anything else, was this a UFO study? And we don't know that. Now that we have a list of the attachments, not a single one dealt with UFOs. We also don't know the context of those 38 reports. So there's a lot of unanswered questions here. Even though we've answered one with what the DIA told me today, there's a lot more to address. So I'm not sure what all that means. But I know that those haters out there that have hated me for asking the questions will absolutely be immediately on the tack with the I told you so comments. I'm sure they will do it commenting on this radio show, because I know all those haters listen in, and I know you're listening, so that's a shout out to you all. But feel free to respond to those comments, because questions are key to answering this mystery, to unraveling it. Now, what they've always failed to realize is it was a valid question to ask, one of quite a few. Now that we have the answer, we can move on to other more important questions that still remain unanswered. In this overall debate, there are some people who find more value in spending their time chastising those asking questions rather than spending it out there looking for answers. As they throw sand in the sandbox, not understanding the value of verifiable information. And I go back to that puzzle. Take a piece out, you can still figure out the picture. I will keep pushing for answers, and I'll report what I find. Now, to those haters out there that have really a few of them found themselves on a ban list and block list on Twitter and social media because of just being ridiculously rude. In light of everything that I just went over, here's what I have to say to you. You're welcome. I hope that you guys start pushing for answers also, instead of just showing blind allegiance. Blind allegiance is that recipe for disaster. So start asking questions and start doing that research. Lay off on doing the blogs for a little bit and start realizing that we just don't have every piece of the puzzle yet. But asking the questions, that's when they come in. All right, John Burroughs coming up in the TBV Dialogues segment. You stay tuned. That's coming right up. On this episode's TBV Dialogues segment, I welcome retired Air Force John Burroughs. John entered the United States Air Force in 1979, and he served 27 years both in active and reserve duty. John had various assignments throughout his Air Force career that stationed him at various military installations around the globe. The most notable assignment began in 1979. He was assigned as a security police law enforcement patrolman at RAF Bentwaters in England. In the early morning hours of December 26, 1980, while working a law enforcement patrol at RAF Woodbridge, he had a bizarre UFO encounter, which, although is highly debated to this day, it remains a mystery. He recounts this tale in his book Encounter in Rendlesham Forest, the inside story of the world's best documented UFO incident, where he and co-authors Nick Pope and Jim Peniston recount the experience. John, thank you so much for joining me here on the Black Vault Radio.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on. Our roles are kind of reversed. I've had the pleasure of being on your show that you co-host with Linda Moulton Howe. For my listeners who don't know about that show, it's Phenomenon. It's on KGRA. Definitely tune in. It's always a pleasure to be on it. They have great guests, great information. So, John, it's good to be able to kind of reverse the roles a little bit and ask you some questions here. I want to start with your background in the United States Air Force. Before we get to, December 26th, tell me a little bit about what you were doing at RAF Bentwaters. What was your mission?
Well, the mission itself was they had just switched over prior to I arrived there. They were F4 base, and that was part of NATO also, and they had aircraft on alert. Right as I was coming in, they were transitioning from F4s to A-10s. And the A-10 was new at the time, still around today, but it was brand new, and we ended up being, by the time all the A-10s came in and everything, the largest attack fighter wing in the Air Force. But the idea was the A-10 was supposed to supplement our tanks because the Russians had such a superior advantage. So they went ahead and brought the A-10 in, built it and brought it in to help with the Russians' advantage with tanks. Basically, it was my first base. I was an airman. And I went from, when I started there, being basically a gate guard to towards the end, and during the event, I was basically a law enforcement patrolman, which would be like an everyday city cop, and in a major city or a regular city. So, law enforcement was my background at that point.
And just to clear up confusion for those listening, obviously this was in England. This was a British base, right? This was leased to the United States military.
Right. It was that base, and most of the American bases were assigned to NATO. It was really, we were occupying British land, so technically we were leasing it, but in reality it was a NATO base because everything that we did and the certifications had to go through NATO.
Gotcha. And we're getting to that December 26th early morning hours investigation, but can you give the audience an example or maybe even two of the types of, it sounds like investigations that you were doing in your law enforcement duties? I mean, what kind of stuff were you researching on the base or investigating on the base?
Well, it was just like I said, a base is like a small city. I mean, and depending on the base and how big it is, there's some of the bases that are as big as a small city now, or a medium-sized city. Our base was we had two bases, Bentwaters, Woodbridge. It was two bases. They were separated by, I think, about 8 miles of forest. But basically, it's just, you did what a policeman would do, patrol, traffic, accidents, break-ins, any kind of fights, anything like that. You were just a patrolman. Okay.
And so let's get to the early morning hours, December 26th, 1980. Go ahead and set the stage for me. What were you doing then?
Well, it was our last mid. It was Christmas night when we came on at 2300. It was quiet as it could be. Nothing was going on. I was over at Woodbridge with my new supervisor, just recently arrived at the base. And Woodbridge was always much quieter than Bentwaters anyway, and everything was shut down. And we were both in individual police cars, patrol cars, but around 3 o'clock, 2:33, he asked to meet up with me because he had just gotten there, I think in the last month or so, and he was my supervisor, and he wanted to, take some time to talk with me. And so I got in, met up with him, got in his car, and we started driving around. One of the checks that we did would be down around the perimeter on the east gate. We would check the gate to make sure it was secure. And as we were heading down the Flatline Road, passing the control tower, he saw something in the sky. It looked like, the best way to describe it is it was something he saw coming down into the forest. He got my attention, as far as like, hey, John, have you seen anything like this? Or, by the time I looked, whatever it was in the forest. I'd been there over a year and a half and been down at the gate at night and different things. So I had never seen anything like that, coming from the forest itself. So at that point, we decided we'd better look at it a little closer. We didn't really want to call it in because we didn't know for sure. We didn't want to make a big deal about something. So we went ahead and opened up the gate, drove down to the end of the road. I got out, and when I got out of the vehicle, it almost looked like whatever it was starting to come towards the road and out of the forest, and there was like a static electricity in the air. It just didn't seem right. So at that point, we figured something was going on, and we better get back up and call it in, let everybody know something was happening just outside the perimeter, of Woodbridge.
Is it weird for, let's say, any aircraft to be outside the perimeter there? I mean, was that incredibly abnormal, or were you guys thinking, hey, maybe this is a helicopter of some kind, or was this really bizarre?
Well, remember now, it was Christmas night, so the base was shut down. It was locked down. So, I mean, and what I mean by nobody was working, So, I mean, at different times during at night, their stuff would be going on. They could even have night flying going on. But at this particular night, yeah, it was a little weird. And at first, him and I didn't know what it was or felt like it was an aircraft or anything. He just saw something go down into the forest, and and then we could see it in the forest, so we figured we'd take a little closer look. So, no, the airfield ran parallel to the flight line road. So again, there could be, if it had been a different time, the first thought might have been an aircraft, but at that particular night, no, not for us anyway.
Okay, and so you reported it. What happened next? Well,
then basically what happened was, at first we called the law enforcement desk. We had a direct line to them, and he kind of didn't know what to do with it, on top of the fact that I played jokes on him before, so he didn't know. He transferred me over to CSC, who, when we told him what was going on, called for the security supervisor on Woodbridge to come down and take a look at it. So he came down, that was Sergeant Peniston, saw the same things we were seeing in the forest, got on the phone with them, started filling them in. And now this has come from him because I wasn't involved in the conversation, was basically they started checking around based on what Stefan said he saw and it was in the forest. They started with our radar and forked out to different radar locations in the area. And what basically came back was that something had been picked up on radar over our area in the last few minutes and it disappeared. So at that point, and that was always something that over the years people always challenged why we went off. Realistically, it really should have just been the Breeze Police showed up, took a look, and maybe the fire could have come out, or came out too. But because something disappeared on radar, our shift commander went ahead and made the call to let us go out into the forest area. And they did call the Breeze Police and the fire department too, but they went ahead and let us go out into the forest to take a closer look to see if it was a downed aircraft.
Before we get to you getting out there and taking a closer look, talk to me about the radar signature. I mean, obviously you guys are the pros, the radar operators are the pros. They understand the aircraft coming in and out, at least, your aircraft. Was there talk about size, shape, speed, anything? Could that be discerned from the signature?
Well, that's the thing. I wasn't even, Peniston was on the phone with him, so but he didn't get that either because that was going through CSC, who was talking to, started, I guess, with RAPCON, which is on the base, our tower. Then it went to Eastern Radar. I believe they even contacted Heathrow. I'm not sure why, but there was a call around the area to the different radar sites. And to be honest with you, I think if I remember right, it was Eastern Radar that I remember them confirming for sure had something on radar and disappeared. So as far as what they were seeing or anything else, no, I have no idea.
Okay. And again, before we get out to you, at the site of where this thing was, at this point, did you have an idea of what this was?
No. Matter of fact, for me, when I was looking at it, it was like, what are we looking at? What is this? I mean, no, I didn't think about it being alien or UFO, type of craft. It was more of like, well, I've been here quite a while and never seen that kind of weirdness in the forest and never had that feeling when we first went down the road. So I was intrigued. I mean, I kind of wanted to get out there to see what it was. And, and then when they came back with maybe a plane went down or something, it's like, okay, well, let's go and see what it is.
So let's talk about you going to see what it is. Did it take you a while to get there? Was it fairly close by?
Well, there's discrepancies on that, even with the statements and what different people remember. But basically, this is how I remember it. Okay, we went down the main road like we did the first time. We made a right, went farther down that road to a forest tracking road. We went in down that road as far as we could. What I remember, and today there's no fence there, but I've been told by people that lived in the area and the Forest Service there was a fence, and the road was bumpy, and we got stopped by the first fence, got out of the vehicle, climbed over the first fence, and started going into the forest. The light, what I can remember was it seemed like it moved from straight out, started drifting out towards in the forest, towards to the right. So we started going into the forest towards the area where we thought the light was, or whatever it was.
Okay. And at this point, you had still only had that first sighting, right? So now you're just trying to figure out, did it land? Did it crash? Did it anything, right? Am I on the same page?
Well, we're just following the whatever, emanating from the forest. That's what I mean. That was, like I said, something I read or disappeared, and then there was some kind of lighting in the forest. So
you're still seeing the light, just to make sure.
Yeah, we're still seeing the light. That's what I mean. I mean, we weren't just going in to the forest blind, like, well, we'll see if we can see something. The light was still there.
Okay.
But it seemed to move back. And I mean, to be straightforward with you, I mean, it was all happening so fast, but you kind of started to wonder. I mean, aircraft usually don't, move forward, move back, move to the right, and stuff like that. So
it was obviously, well, before I put words in your mouth, did you feel that it was trying to outmaneuver you in the sense that, hey, you were approaching it, so it moved out of the way, or was it just moving as you were approaching it?
Basically what you just said, moving. I mean, it was happening so quick, there wasn't a lot of time to think about it. It was just like, let's try to get to the source.
Okay. And so how far away did you get from it?
Well, now Pennis's statement, and he says, and people that were listening said that they remember at one point we thought we were on it, then we passed it. But what I can remember is pretty simple. We went into the forest, and it was there, and then there was like a berm, like a little bit of a hilly berm. So we were on the forest. We started to go up the berm towards where the light appeared to be, and all of a sudden we were in front of it. It was in front of us. It was a bright white light, got brighter. We saw it, and we just basically all hit the ground. We were like in a line, almost a line formation, but we were kind of separated, even like he was in front of me, I was a little bit behind him in a line, and Command Sack was behind me. And all of a sudden it was there, it got really bright, and we all hit the ground. And again, here comes the discrepancies. I remember it got bright, it seemed to dim, and then get bright again, and then boom, it was up in trees and gone. And then the other guys remember different things that happened other than I do.
You've brought up the discrepancies a couple times now. Do you mind me asking about that? I mean, do you have an explanation towards that? Is it just the interpretation of what different human brains saw? Or
you know how people like over the years have said, well, you can have three people see the same thing and they'll kind of remember it differently.
Sure.
But these are major discrepancies, and the fact that later on, years later, when this report called Project Conline came out, and it got a little more in detail about if you were dealing with something, they call it a UAP, that when you get close to it, it affects you on how you see things and what you remember. It can even cause you to have memory loss. And so it's possible if, based on the guy that wrote the report and the documents you were looking at to write this report, that whatever we encountered could have affected what we saw and remembered.
I want to get into the health issues and memory loss and stuff like that in a bit, but let me ask you, when you guys hit the ground, or at least your remembrance of it, you hit the ground, what happened after that?
Well, like I said, it got bright, so we hit the ground. It seemed to dim a little bit. Then it seemed to get brighter again, and then it kind of just lifted up and took off.
Yeah,
it was like It was fast. I mean,
Yeah.
but for me, it was just like boom, boom, it was gone. The only thing I remember clearly was Peniston was in front of me yelling at me to open fire on it. And there had been a mix-up with, they were carrying, 16s and I had a 38. And originally when I was standing up at the gate, we were told to all give our weapons, hand our weapons over. And so I handed mine over to Steffens because he stayed behind. And then Peniston, I guess, said he was told I could go off armed, but somehow the message never got to me. So he thought I was still armed, and he wanted me to open up on it. Now, Kabansak has said in an interview we got close to it, and I actually drew my weapon, and then we all blacked out. So see what I'm saying? There's a lot of discrepancies in what we remember, and Peniston does say he remembers yelling at me to fire at it and thought I was armed. So
Do you feel there was, let's say you were armed, do you feel that there was enough time to even draw your weapon and open up on it, or did it just happen way too fast for that?
Well, for me, it was just boom, boom, and it was over. So it was like I said, I remember him yelling to open up on it, and then it seemed like it just, was up and gone then. So yeah, it's hard to say.
No, I got you. And there was physical evidence that a craft had been in the area, right?
Well, yeah, the next day when we went back out, there was damage to the trees, to the canopy above. There was indentations in the ground. And then when Halt went back out there a couple of nights later, they found traces of radiation and stuff like that.
Okay, and so before we get to that, you had said you had blacked out after the craft left.
Kabansak said we blacked out. I said we just hit the ground, then it was gone, and we got back up. So.
And I'm sorry, you said who said you blacked out, but you didn't feel you did?
Kabansak said we all blacked out when I drew my weapon. He remembers me drawing my weapon, and we all blacked out.
I gotcha, but you didn't have a weapon. Okay, so that was a discrepancy.
I don't remember having a weapon. I'm just telling you, I do not remember being armed.
I gotcha. Okay, all right. So next morning, you guys go back out there. There's physical.
Well, you want me to finish what happened, or?
Oh no, please.
Happened?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I thought that was kind of.
No. And here's why I want to set the stage, because over the years, people have tried to debunk it, said it was lighthouses, planets, and stars. I think the planets and stars was more with Halt and meteors. Okay. What I tell you is, whatever we got close to, where we were at, it was not a lighthouse.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, in my statement, I do say when we got farther out, we went over another fence, went into the field. We saw something down by these houses. So we got up, we went down towards the houses. Once we got past the houses in a road, started going into another field, that's when you could see a beacon. And we did follow the beacon, so we ended up seeing it was the lighthouse beacon. But there was no way what I encountered, as far as saw in the forest was the lighthouse. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, so I don't know what it was, but so we went further out even after that, and there was a thing where for 45 minutes they lost radio contact with us. And when we finally got back on the radio with them, whatever it was gone. We came up on this hill, which is Barrow Hill, from what the locals have now told me, which was about a 45-minute hike out, and could see the lighthouse and the coast. And at that point, we were told to come back.
How long did that night take when you guys drove out there, went over the fence, hiked out there?
I remember we got back. It started around 3, and we were basically back where, back to the area where they were all staged, waiting for us to come back between 5 and 6. So
about 3 hours.
Yeah. I mean, again, 2.5, 3 hours.
Okay. No, yeah, I'm sure it's not exact, but that helps kind of set the stage. Okay, so they lose contact with you guys for 45 minutes.
Right, they had no radio contact with us.
0. Did you guys know that at the time, or were they trying to reach you and you just didn't know your radios weren't working?
We were trying to reach them, they were trying to reach us. So yeah, we knew we couldn't reach you on the radio for a while, yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, is that everything? Because I know we've kind of jumped around a little bit.
That's pretty much, the first night,
Okay.
Other than, I want to say this, that because I never hide from this, because this is part of what's come out. Peniston claims that we were there, and while we were there, he got up. Once we all hit the ground, he got up. The other two of us didn't. Matter of fact, he says Kabansak wasn't even with us. He was back at the vehicle. But Ed and I both remember us being together with him. And he walked around it, saw glyphs on it, touched the glyphs, got a binary download, wrote it all down in his notebook or the glyphs and everything else, and then it left and departed. So that's the other part of, one of the other people that were involved, what they saw and, claimed happened.
Yeah. Now, I don't want you to speak for him at all, but if you don't mind me asking, because that information has come out, that is not in your recollection, right?
No. It's not in Ed or mine's recollection whatsoever, no, about that whole part of it he talks about. And just even the part that he got up and walked around it and stuff, no.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it happened pretty quick. So, well, that's
what I remembered.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, discrepancy.
Can I ask bluntly, do you believe that aspect of the story? Because it took many years for Jim Penniston to come out with that, right? I mean, that was not...
Well, so to be fair, okay?
Yeah.
It to me, all right, there's some things in it that don't add up, okay? And the part with the notebook didn't come out till after he got out. And even when we filmed Strange But True, he never talked about a notebook or anything else. He did mention Strange But True, he saw something on the craft. So he did talk about early on that he saw more than, I remember, or Ed, right? But the notebook then came out closer to the 20-year mark, and then the drawings of the glyphs. And then it was another 10 years to the 30th anniversary before he said he wrote stuff down the next day, and then the binary came up. So there's discrepancies with it, and it doesn't all add up to me. And the only thing I could say is he did go under hypnosis, and I think it was 894. And under hypnosis, he did book, or I think a notebook, and then he talked about binary. So it did come out. There's been different things that say it could have happened, but then there's also discrepancies that it may not have happened.
You brought up the hypnotic regression. That's always been something that I've been on the fence about. I don't know or have any answers to it, but there's always been some questions if you need that to remember everything. Did you need that? Meaning, did you need a hypnotic regression to remember some of the details, or have these details been with you all along?
No, a lot of the fill in the blank stuff. Okay, for example, this has gone on for years, so this is like the history. As a matter of fact, it was funny. I just read something today about how in the mid '80s they may have been doing a similar type of investigation, like they just admitted to they did. And I was reached out to I just gotten out of active to go on UFO Cover-Up Live. Mm-hmm. And so I met with the executive producer, and we were talking about this, and it was like, well, you can't remember this and this, but other people say this and this happened. I said, okay. So he convinced me to, first I met with the producer, and then for some reason they decided not to put anything about Bentwaters in that particular show, but he convinced me to go under hypnosis. And when I did go under, a lot more things came out about the whole event and everything else.
So do you feel that then those details are exactly how it happened, or do you feel that you even question what came out of that?
To be fair, I mean, it filled in some of the missing blank, some of the things that whatever, but it really took a weird turn with, they call it, some people call it channeling, but they act like you're being able to reconnect with whatever happened and what was going on at that moment, and different people, and some of the things that came out about it were very strange. It's kind of like, where did this come from? Because this was in the late 80s, and there wasn't all the internet and all this stuff on TV and everything else. There was some movies and different things, but I really wasn't into all that. And plus, I was with the military gone a lot, so I really hadn't followed all that. So it was really just strange for some of the stuff to come out. But it did help fill in some of the pieces, as far as what I couldn't remember. It put something in that spot. Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to go back to the morning after and the investigation, going back to the site, because I don't think we've really adequately covered that and what your experience was. Was there what's the right way to ask this? A physical investigation, collecting samples. I know you said that they were testing for radiation, But in addition to that, did they take samples from the trees, the ground, the dirt, or did they just use the guys?
I can kind of fill in what I know. Okay, and this is what I know. We went and saw the shift commander after work, then we went back out there. There was the British police were out there. We had some our own Air Force people out there, and that's when we saw the indentations and the damage to the trees. Then we went home. Now, on the third night, Halt said they were out there and they were taking samples, taking pictures, and and had a radiation, a meter out there. They were testing for radiation. So, yeah, and then afterwards, some team came in and went out into the forest. So the rumor had it, or what's been said over the years, was they actually took stuff out too. So, and then what the MOD themselves admitted was Gabriel came in, after the event and took everything with him back to headquarters USAF. So.
Now, when you say some team came in, do you know who, or do you think you know who? Or
well, I can tell you this much: I saw the plane come in Sunday night, and it was a Langley tail number, and it was a C-5, and it came in and went to a restricted area that was highly, restricted. What I was told by the security guys was they brought their own security. They had their own helicopters and everything else. I was put on the gate when I came back off a break on Monday, Tuesday, and I myself witnessed helicopters over the forest area and different vehicles and stuff coming in and out. So there was some kind of team came in. You've had Clifford Stone claim it was a team from USAF, but I know this much. And there was another aircraft that was a Woodbridge that was also out there that had people that came in. So definitely one plane came in from Langley. I think you can fill in the blanks with that. And then there was another team supposedly came in from USAF. So
obvious. This is obvious, but just for clarity's sake, in the audience who's listening, there was no evidence of a crash. There was evidence of a physical craft. You saw it. It was confirmed on radar.
Well, I never saw a craft. Penniston claims it was a craft. Now, then there was something on radar. What I can say is...
You saw the light, though. Like it was a very blinding light.
I've always called it lights, or like it threw off an impression of maybe an object or something. But I can't say it was physical craft, but there was indentations in the ground, and there was damage to the trees.
Okay.
The canopy.
So physical evidence that a craft was there.
Or something came in there.
There's something came in. With your experience, because as I said very briefly in the introduction, I mean, you've been stationed all around the world. By your experience and being out there physically, seeing what you did, can you say this had close visual signatures with your human eye, not radar, of whatever jet aircraft? And you said you saw a lot of A-10s going in and out of there. Obviously, those are not VTOL or vertical takeoff or landing. Is there anything that you can say like, hey, it could have been this? Is there anything that's close?
No, and that was the whole point at the time, and that's how I think the story's grown over the years with, actually it was planted real early on. It was a UFO incident by somebody from our own squadron that may have been told to do that with some people that were, I don't know what they call them over, I forget what the name they use for these investigators over there, but they had something like MUFON over there. And so they planted a UFO story, which, as far as that went, right away it killed a lot of interest, I believe. But no, there was nothing that at the time what I saw, and the different things that I saw over the couple of nights I was out there that I felt we had in our inventory that could explain it. Now, over the years, not only did I see some stuff with my own eyes with our own technology, but there's been a lot of declassified documents that have come out that showed that whole area was a huge R&D place for both American and British, military and contractors, including Marconi. So some of what was going on could have been our own technology. But there's also a pretty good proof that there's some kind of strange phenomenon, because there's still stuff going on there to this day.
I want to get into some of that technology, but I also I want to ask you, because you said that the UFO story was planted. For you, not speaking for anybody else, but for you, when were you convinced this really was a UFO in the sense that it was not anything American and not anything British? I mean, how long did that take you to come to grips with?
Well, I think pretty quick. I mean, as far as it was unidentified. I mean, and what I mean by UFO was I didn't think it was alien or anything like that. I just basically couldn't grasp what it was or how to explain it.
But you said the UFO story was planted. So what do you mean by that? Meaning that somebody planted...
There was a guy that was in the squadron that worked for the squadron commander that went to some women, like I said, that were, I think it was Bufo or something. They had a different name for it, the MUFON in the States.
Yeah.
But went to them like within a matter of days and told them the story about how aliens, a craft had landed in the forest with aliens and all that other stuff. And that's what started them looking into it, which, eventually led between what the work they were doing and some other stuff that led to News of the World article, with the Halt memo getting released.
Yeah.
But it was very early on they planted that it was aliens in the forest. And
you said that kind of hurt and killed trying to figure out what this was.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, people kind of, when they hear stories, they think of right now, which would be a little different maybe. But back then, man, that was just, UFOs were made fun. Everything like that kind of stuff was kind of just made fun of. That's when the conferences they'd have over the, going forward from that would have guys in tin hat. You know what I mean? It wasn't, it didn't have the people looking at it and stuff going on that they do today or the internet. So that was something that would, as soon as you hear aliens, anybody that, probably any newspaper, anybody like a good investigative reporter is going to go, aliens? Okay, I'm not looking at that.
Yeah. Oh, I got you. The ridicule factor. You brought up the Halt memo. Give the audience an idea of what you're talking about with what is the Halt memo.
Well, basically, I'll kind of sum up real fast here on this. Okay, after it happened, we had to go in, and there was a second night I was out there, which was even crazier than the first. But and I can maybe talk about that in a minute. But basically, we were brought in, saw the command. I went in and had to see Hall write a statement. See Hall, then I saw Conrad, then I saw Williams, which was the wing commander, and there were the three of us all went to each one of them, and Pennison was the NCO, so he was the one that did the talking. And basically, what I was told was, leave it alone. If we have any questions, we'll get back to you. And we're looking into it, and that was it. And so I went on my merry way, and I finished my tour at Bentwaters because there's rumors a bunch of us got moved out of there. There's a couple guys that people have looked into that may have left earlier than they were supposed to, but the rest of us left when we were supposed to. And I got to my second assignment, went through that whole assignment, everything was fine. Was on my third assignment, and that's when the phone started ringing off the hook from people around the world calling me about the News of the World story about aliens in the forest. And that was a whole fiasco.
Yeah.
I did get moved. I did get an assignment because of that. I got moved from Arizona to Korea, and that's the hardest place at that time in the world to get in any reporter or anybody in. And I didn't know until years later that the halt was down at Kunsan when I was up at Osan, and Williams was in charge of PACAF over at Philippines. So they moved all three of us.
Was the idea, in your opinion, so you couldn't talk to anybody and that you just were isolated?
CNN came knocking when News of the World came out, and I got called in because when all these other people I just hang up on, not say anything to. But when CNN called, it was like I had to report to public affairs. And then so I did. I went in, and the public affairs officer wasn't there, but the NCO was. I explained to her what was going on. She just kind of stared at me. I didn't tell her much, but she stared at me what I did tell her. I just said, have them call and find out what they want me to do with the CNN reporters coming in about the Bentwaters incident. I gave her the dates, stuff. So I went on my way, and the next day I came into work, and I got called. I got pulled. I was arming up. I got pulled out of guard mount and had to go up into the battle staff secure line and talk to the Pentagon about all of it. And they basically, the sum of it was, the cat's out of the bag with the memo, but just basically tell them something happened and let it go. And there was all kinds of stuff they're trying to feed me about this person was wrong, this was wrong, that was wrong. And at first I said, well, you know what, how about I just don't talk to him? And it was a general. He's like, no, I'm ordering you to talk to him. So I had to meet him off base in civilian clothes and confirm something happened. But when I saw the Halt memo, I did tell him one thing. I said, it's not accurate. So, he's like looking at me, what do you mean? I go, well, the dates are wrong. Everything's jumbled together. There's a lot more to it than what the memo's saying, and the dates aren't right. So
okay, I want to get. I don't mean to interrupt you, but you bring up a couple different things. I'm not sure which to tackle first. So the general told you talk to the media, but in the same breath, to make sure I understood you right, was he trying to make you discredit other people?
No. What was going on? There was the general was head of public affairs. I didn't know that at the time, but I found this out later. The guy with him on the phone was a captain, and he happened to have been at Bentwaters when the incident took place. He was a cop, shift commander, but he had gone into public affairs. What they were basically saying was stick by the halt memo, which I hadn't seen.
Okay, gotcha.
And just confirm that there were strange lights in the forest, and that, I hate to bring this guy up because he's been such a pain in the butt for the whole case, but the Larry Warren factor was already in play. And it was like, there's a guy by the name of Warren, he's talking about aliens doing this and all that. And he said that Captain Graham interrupts the general and says, we all know there was no aliens there and stuff, John. And I'm like, well, okay, that's fair. But I said, I basically was telling him, I have no idea what's going on with all this. Mm-hmm. So why do I need to say really anything? But then they didn't want it to make it look like they were hiding us, and covering something up. That event did take place because they had to admit that the event took place because there's a memo. So basically, I didn't want to talk. I got told just to meet with them briefly and just confirm that the event took place and that I support the halt memo. But of course, me being me, when I saw the memo, I couldn't support it. It was wrong. You know what I mean? It wasn't right. It wasn't even close to being right.
And did you tell the CNN that, or did you?
I told the Carl that. I said the memo's wrong. I said it's jumbled into. Looks like it was one event, and the dates are wrong. Or it's two events. And he just looked at me and is like, "What do you mean?" I go, "Well, I'm not going to say anymore. Look, something happened out there. Saw something strange, can't explain it. The memo's not right." And he was cool. I mean, he was pretty cool. He was like, "I respect your privacy. Thanks for meeting with me," and let it go at that point. But right away, the memo was wrong. So it even smelled right then to me.
Do you have an opinion on why it was wrong? I mean, was this just a difference of interpretation, or do you feel that this was a malicious intent to deceive?
Paul lied about a lot of things. But the two that stuck out the most was he stuck to his story for a while that the memo was right until people started investigating and digging into documents, and they found out when the Bruce police were called, when they came out. So the cat was kind of out of the bag that the memo didn't have the right dates in it. And so then he finally caved in on that, and then he said it was just an administrative error that, he didn't get the dates right. But prior to that, he was saying that he did get the dates right because everything he did, he took from the statements, the police reports, and everything else. Well, if he did really do that, which I believe he would because he was anal, and anyway, then the dates on this stuff confirmed that it was the 26th. And not only that, eventually the statements came out, and he was the one that released them, showed it was a 26 at 0300. So the cover-up started with the dates and times being wrong, and you can fill in the blanks on why. It could be to keep people from doing FOIA, questioning. There's a whole bunch of reasons why behind it, but he lied about that. And then the other thing that he lied about forever and got busted on that eventually was that the third night that I was not only was there, but Adrian Bustinza and I went forward. So at first he denied either one of us were involved. Then the tape came out and got cleaned up, and they could hear both of us were on the tape. So then he tried to say eventually that Bustinza was with him the whole time, but that I never got out there. And then he didn't realize I had a tape where he admitted to somebody that I did. So when he found out about that, he's finally admitted now that Bustinza and I went forward of his group.
Well, I'm curious about if you can help us fill in the blanks, because I don't know, and the audience that's listening is curious. With those discrepancies on that halt memo, do you think it was to maliciously deceive the public? Not just to avoid FOIA, but I'm talking about maliciously deceive the public into what really happened out there.
Well, Halt himself has done interviews, and one time he said there was more than one site created, several sites created, and the dates and times were mixed up purposely to deceive people, the public, FOIA. And the interesting thing was, if you looked at FOIA, what little did come out from the MOD, they weren't happy that Gabriel took everything, and they seemed to have kept somewhat out of the loop at least. So it's really even not genuine when they say that the British didn't get briefed until a week and a half later. That's not the protocol and everything else, because the police knew about it, and so I guarantee you somebody was briefed pretty quickly that we were out in the forest around chasing something, on British soil, and they would have had to have called them to see if anything was going on, or with them or whatever. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So there's been a lot of misleading information put out, and it started right at the very beginning.
And I think it got, correct me if I'm wrong, muddier. The waters got muddier as the years ticked on. I think I remember hearing 8-9 years ago, Halt was doing a radio interview, and then he started saying that he felt that you guys were drugged and hypnotized out there, right? I mean, isn't that something that he said?
Well, that's been an interesting development, just because of the fact that I've got disability from the incident, and another guy's gotten it, and based on both of us getting it, some people have started asking questions inside, wanting to know how this could have all taken place, and the fact that you have a colonel running around saying that we were all, interrogated and everything else. And then, to be honest, with some of the people that were involved claim they were brought in and interrogated. Peniston didn't remember it until after he went under hypnosis, but a couple other people did say that there was some, a couple agencies that were in there interrogating them. So there's been a question raised about what the heck really happened, even to include the fact that when I started getting into all my stuff, the Air Force denied I was in from 79 to 82, and so that started a big problem with McCain. And then more questions started to be asked, and they finally were able to get the Air Force to admit I was in 79 to 82 and change the DD-4214. But then they pulled another deal that they were working on the table, and McCain actually threatened to open an investigation and all this. And that's finally when things got handled. But this is just one thing after another with this case and everything else.
Well, before we jump too far ahead, because you had mentioned McCain, I want to kind of set the stage here. And I know I'm getting into a little bit of a sensitive area, so I'm going to let you take the lead on what you want to go into. But I know publicly you have said, and even alluded to it now, that there have been some health issues that you feel have tied back to this. Again, I'll let you take the lead. Can you talk about what...
Well, yeah, because, here's the thing. All right, I got sick right after... First of all, right after the event, I didn't feel well, okay? And I had some health issues. Then later in the spring, they found a heart murmur, okay? And it ends up being that one of the things I could say that people have tried to discredit is this. I have an entry physical. I had no heart issues. And when they found the heart issue, it was huge. It was loud. It was very clear that there was an issue. Matter of fact, when a doctor came into the base I was at, he thought I was having huge heart issues and had me immediately taken to Wright-Patterson, and they did a big evaluation on it, okay? He came back and said, you have mitral valve prolapse, regurgitation. He didn't really go into how I got it or why I got it. If I remember right, there was a brief conversation he didn't think it was hereditary, but he wasn't sure how I got it, and they were going to monitor it, okay? So that started the whole heart thing. But in 2010, after I got back from England, I got really sick. And it's a long story, so I'll kind of cut through it. I got sick the first time. The doctors couldn't figure out. They knew what the symptoms were, AFib, congestive heart failure. But what was going on didn't match the symptoms, because the damage that they could see, they couldn't match to the symptoms. Even the healthcare program plan I was on denied a couple tests, which later on were done anyway through the VA, and they would have come up clean. So they didn't know what was going on. So he wanted to look at my original diagnosis, okay? Mm-hmm. And I requested my records, and I got the runaround. So then I went to Senator Kyle and asked for my personnel and my medical records. Well, they did an inquiry. The Air Force responded back, my records were not where they were supposed to be. So he sends me back a letter, and I call the aide, and I go, what are you going to do? We're pushing this further to find out what's going on. I said, fine. So the next time I get notification was I got a small part of my personnel records, but none of it had anything to do with Bentwaters. So I thought that was strange, but no medical records, okay? So she sends me a letter saying that I had to go down and file disability because my records were classified, and at that point they could get better access to my records, okay? So I've got the letter. I've displayed that in a couple presentations I've done. So this aide knew pretty quick that my records were classified. Well, it was like, well, I'm not big in the system. Like, what do you mean they're classified? There's a section in the military for all branches that certain things and events or whatever go on, they can classify your medical stuff. I'm like, okay. So she goes, what we're going to do is get you care, but you're never going to know what happened. I'm like, fine. So we turned around and filed disability, and they continued to push for my records because what they felt was is once the VA got the disability request, they'd have to ask for my records, right?
Yeah.
To evaluate my condition because we're applying for disability, so therefore they have to look at my records when I claim this stuff happens. So, all right, so all this happens, but there's stalling going on. Now, Kyle didn't run for re-election, and the guy replaced him. I forget his name now. He just didn't run this last time. But she recommended I go to McCain. So I went to McCain's office. So they turned around and they kind of cut through some red tape and got me in to be evaluated. When I went in to be evaluated, the doctor looked at me and she said, I don't understand how you could be claiming this. You weren't in the Air Force until 82. And I'm looking at her like, what? She goes, we have no medical records, no information on you until 82. So therefore, what you're saying can't be true. And I had some pay records and some stuff. I pulled it out, and she looked at her eyes, got big. I says, so how are you going to give me a fair evaluation? She says, well, that's above my pay grade. I'll write up what I can, and we'll see what happens. So I left there. I called McCain's office, and they were like, well, we'll see what happens. Well, I think it was 3 months later, I got a letter denying my claim for the following reasons. No medical records and no records of me being in the service from 79 to 82.
Wow.
So that's where it stood. And then when I got the letter, I immediately went to McCain, and they were like, what is going on? You know, it's clearly you're in. So first thing we did was we put in some FOIA, and the state has an appeal system that you can go through. It's independent. Mm-hmm. So went in and saw the guy, and he could look at some of my stuff from the VA, and he started looking at it and go, well, for number one, they've lied to you and to McCain because they've held back a bunch of your stuff that you've requested based on the first evaluation. Mm-hmm. I go, what do you mean? He goes, there's a lot of files here that they didn't send to McCain because we had some of them. So we immediately filed another request on that. Mm-hmm. So now even the VA was playing, weird, right? So we went ahead, and this process went on for a while. And at one point, I remember getting a phone call at work, and the aide calls me up and says, you're not going to believe this. We just talked to AFRPC. They're denying anything having to do still with you being in the Air Force and stuff in 79, 82. So I go, I sounded like them. I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, why don't you call them? I called them. Yep, I wasn't in according to them. So I hung up with the phone, and I pounded my head into the ground. And I came up with this idea. I says, I got one more possibility. Call up retirement. And I said to him, I'm calling up to confirm I'm not retired. And the lady laughed at me, and she said, why? And I told her, and she started looking at my file, and I did bring up, we just talked to FRPC. She could see that they had. And I says, well, they're denying I was in 79, 82, so I couldn't be retired. She goes, well, there's records in here showing you where you were and what you were doing in 79 to 82. So long story short, she did some stuff, certified it, got it to McCain's office. They did some more national record search. They got my DD Form 214 to show that I came in 79.
Wow.
So quite a while. McCain's office says this is a much higher aid than the lady. She did all the work, but there was a higher aid getting involved for his contacts in D.C. Mm-hmm. Comes back and says she did a yeoman job to get this done, but you're never going to know what happened to you. But let's see what we can do next. All of a sudden, the VA wants to play ball, says deny your appeal, and put in new evidence, which is now that you were really in, and we'll take care of you really fast. Well, I get this phone call that was all done, everything was agreed to, and so I did the request, put everything in and everything, and 3 months go by, and I get a letter saying, thank you for withdrawing your appeal, the case is closed.
Wow.
It's like, what? So I call her. She's going through the roof because I told her this wasn't going to end well.
Yeah.
And so she starts making phone calls. What happens next is that the VA in Phoenix is like, oh, we don't know what just happened, but this got killed high up, way up in D.C., and this is making us look bad. And so we filed an IG complaint, and McCain actually personally got involved and told them that either this gets rectified or there's going to be a inquiry on what happened. And so they get a guy in there with a clearance, but he comes back and says he can't get in my records. He can't see my stuff, most of it, and stuff. So he was even blocked from it. So eventually what ended up happening was they changed my records, admitted I was in 79, and they granted me full disability.
That's insane. Do you feel that they were essentially erasing who you were, or was this just to get away from the healthcare stuff? I mean, what do you have an opinion on it at all?
I can tell you what I was told, okay, from different people, okay. One of the things was I did the citizens hearing, which will go into the part of why I got my settlement. There's another whole spin to this, okay? But what I was told was that on certain classified things that they actually, people a lot of times don't even know it, they actually do alter people's stuff. So if there's ever an inquiry, they won't show what they were doing. So my records for that whole time were classified, not only that, but my medical records were, okay? And that came, too, from the citizen hearings. One of the guys on there had been a congressman from Maryland, and when the whole story got told that day, most of the people up there that had been in Congress and Senate didn't even know about this section. And when they found out, they made some calls in between breaks, and they were back in shock, too. And they wrote a letter to Obama and the VA to help. They were shocked by this. But what the one guy's aide who was there that still worked with him, he was retired, said their biggest issues, because his district fell under the CIA and everything else, was they constantly knew about this and had to fight this because all kinds of people would get injured in the line of duty, but the stuff was classified and they couldn't prove that they were injured when they said they were.
Wow.
So she helped the aide, too. So what appeared to be going on was our event and what happened to me was locked down for whatever reason. And what ended up happening once they took care of me was two things. I got a letter because we had pending FOIA, which they'd blown and they broke the law, saying that they were no longer going to do answer any of the FOIAs. The case was closed. They were giving me full care, and that's the way it was. And then basically, even now, when it comes to my heart, only certain people are allowed to have access to my records or look at me or treat me.
Do you know how high the classification goes? I mean, and with that, if you can quickly address, because I'm running out of time with you, quickly address how abnormal is it for military records to be classified and denied to the military personnel directly, meaning they're your records. I would think that you would have a right to see them. Is that completely abnormal?
No, everybody said that, but technically the only way, and I think you've ran into this with FOIA and stuff, there's sometimes you just have to sue. And they'll just stonewall you and force you to sue, and even then they'll stonewall you. So, no, technically I should have had access to my records, but I never have. And in fact, some of my VA doctors, the lower level ones, don't have access. They have to write it up and forward it to the people, and they take care of it. So, for example, right now, my heart, I'm signed to the chief of cardiology at the Indianapolis VA Center.
So now they're taking care of you.
Yeah, they're taking care of me. Yes,
but in a good way, meaning like if you're assigned to the chief, that is that a show that hey, you've kind of cut through all that red tape, you've gone through all the BS, and now they're finally making sure that you're taken care of.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, they did. They stepped up. I'm getting treatment.
Good.
But what my point was with this was that even still to this day, they have it all digitized now. But my records, I can ask for them, and anything pertaining to that's in the VISTA system, which is a direct link between the VA and the DOD, and I'm not allowed to have any of those records.
Wow. A couple more questions, and I know I got to let you go. And one of which is we've talked about the health problems, and obviously we've been insinuating that they are connected to your experience at RAF Bentwaters. But again, just for clarity's sake and the audience that's listening, do you find a direct connection between what you are going through health-wise and your experience in the field there?
Well, this is what I could fill in the blanks real fast. Number one, my claim was based solely on the fact that my heart was injured in the line of duty at Bentwaters at the time. So all the documentation presented to the VA were based on that, different things. To include General Williams got involved behind the scenes with McCain because he was friends with McCain, and there was stuff that was handed in that I'm not even aware of. Okay, the other factor that went on with this was after the hearing, a guy in the CIA, believe it or not, at the time of the event, showed up, made contact with Pat Frasconia, the attorney who was helping me, met with him, came and saw me, wrote a letter up for the DOD/VA that was confidential between the attorney, me, and the VA. Once I handed that to them, they knew exactly what to look for. They diagnosed the problem. And so, yeah, there's no doubt whatever we encountered damaged my heart, to me anyway. And there's more than enough information to support that, and that even this particular individual gave them documentation what I was exposed to and what would have caused them.
So here's the $1 million question as we reach the end of the interview here. You obviously have an amazing story. You've gone through this now. You're approaching 39 years since it happened. You've experienced a lot, remembered a lot. Out of everything that you have remembered, seen, document-wise, and we didn't even get into the UK government releasing information and what that did or did not prove. I mean, hopefully,
or even the third night either. What happened?
And yeah, I know you had mentioned that there were other experiences, but after all this time, what do you feel that you encountered out there?
Well, if you go based on what other people saw happen to me, and the fact that there does appear to be some kind of phenomenon there, which I guess would be called a UAP, and there's other people that have had interactions, including what happened at Skinwalker and stuff, because that's one of the things that I've had dealings with some of these people, that there's been other incidents where people have been injured and they don't have the access to care that I do because the incidents are still classified. But ultimately, there's some kind of natural phenomenon that was at Bentwaters or out in the forest that probably was interacting with some kind of technology we were working on testing, even to the point of it could have been something we knew. They knew about this phenomenon there because it had shut down Cobra Mist a few years before, and SRI got called in. So we encountered something out there, and what I could tell you for documents that I've seen and I have, it's the future of our technology. It's whatever it is, they're grasping this, working on this, and it is the future of the military and probably space. They've grasped stuff from that will lead to future technology. But whatever's involved in this also can be damaging to people's health.
Do you feel that this was just highly advanced military equipment that we have yet to hear about, or do you feel that this was alien in nature?
Well, here's the thing, and you've done a lot of work. Do you know what a UAP is for sure?
Well, of course not. No. Unidentified aerial phenomenon. That's about as far as I'll go.
Right, and there's all kinds of things that could lead into what that is. Mm-hmm. So it appears, based on condign and documents and different things that are going on, even to this day with, the group, To the Stars and the scientists involved and the briefing with the DIA and the technology, is something, somehow, this UAP, whatever it is, has something to do with the technology they're developing. So what exactly is, if you read condign, it says it's real, it's, it shows intelligence and everything else. So, and I know there's been some studies of what a possible UAP is up in Norway, and they felt there was something was controlling it and stuff. So there's something to this. Where it's from or what it is another whole, debate and answer, and it appears that our governments are looking at it, but of course what governments normally do is the first thing they think about is weaponizing it. Yeah,
that's pretty much true for everything. Your book that you co-authored with Nick Pope and Jim Peniston is entitled Encounter in Rendlesham Forest. the inside story of the world's best documented UFO incident. That is available bookstores worldwide, and I, of course, will link to the order form on Amazon on the show notes page, www.theblackvault.com/show notes. I'll also give some other links that John and I have talked about. Now, John, let everybody know you do co-host a radio show with Linda Moulton Howe. How can they tune in to listen to you?
Well, it's worldwide internet, so it's on Thursday nights, 8 to 10 Eastern, and we do it on KGRA, so you can go to that link. And just a little hint, I'm pretty sure it's going to happen this time. We had it lined up 3 weeks ago, but he had to bail on family issues. But we hope to have Dr. Nolan on the following week to talk a little bit more about all the studies with DNA and everything else. So
fantastic. Well, you guys both do great work. I talked to Linda yesterday. It's always a pleasure talking to her. I'm glad that I got you on the show and was able to pick your brain. Sounds like you and I have to do a part 2 if you will indulge me with another hour of or plus of your time in the future. But it's been very, very...
Not a problem, and I want to say you do great work too. I love the latest FOIA you just did, and I think there's a key that I just highlighted on my Facebook page today. You notice they said 40 years in advance.
Yeah, and I appreciate the kind words. There's a lot more for you and I to talk about and a lot more for everybody listening to learn about. I really do appreciate you joining me on the Black Vault Radio. So thank you, John, and we'll definitely have you back on again soon. Although that concludes my interview with John Burroughs, don't go away. Coming up on TBV Unredacted, I'll dissect the Halt memo so you can decide what discrepancies there are and compare it with the testimony of John Burroughs. Stay tuned. On this episode's TBV Unredacted, I'm sticking with the theme, as John Burroughs went through the pretty amazing account of the Rendlesham Forest Incident. Of course, as he willingly points out, there are many discrepancies when it comes to the actual witnesses themselves. We brought up the Charles Halt memo, and we didn't really get into it too much. This was a memo that was from the deputy base commander. He was a lieutenant colonel when he wrote the memo. And as John pointed out during the interview, there were a lot of discrepancies. He specifically mentioned the date itself. Now, in front of me, I have the Charles Halt memo, and we didn't go into details about it other than, again, brushing the surface. So I'm not a fan of reading things on this show, and yet here we are, back-to-back episodes. I did read a short thing with Nick Pope's interview, and I decided to do the TBV Unredacted on the Halt memo. That way, even though I will link it in the show notes and you can download it and you can view it and see exactly what it means to you, I thought that I would just go ahead and make an audio representation of it. That way, for those of you who aren't on a computer, you're listening via the Black Vault app, or you're streaming this on YouTube while you work, all of that, you may not be able to read it. So I decided to go ahead and read it to you. Now, for clarification's sake, this is not a document that I claim to have discovered or anything like that. John pointed out this has been around for a long time. So I just want that for the record, because naysayers write in all the time and say, hey, you're taking credit for something. This was already out. No, I didn't discover this. However, I do want to say there was a Freedom of Information Act request that I had filed close to probably, I would say, 18, 19 years ago to the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense. In the group of documents that came to me, the Charles Halt memo was in there. So I want that for the record that we didn't really talk about it being officially released and confirmed. For those who like a verifiable chain that you can trace back on how these documents came to light, I can verify that this is releasable under the Freedom of Information Act. Again, I received it from the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense. However, this document has been around for a very long time. Now, that setting the stage, I want to go ahead and read this document to you so you have an idea of what the Halt memo said. It was dated 13 January 1981. The letterhead was Department of the Air Force. The subject was unexplained lights. This is regarding RE colon on the memo, RAF/CC. Number 1, it is in 3 paragraphs, all numbered. Number 1, early in the morning of 27 December 1980, approximately 0300, 2 United States Air Force Security Police patrolmen saw unusual lights outside the back gate at RAF Woodbridge. Thinking an aircraft might have crashed or been forced down, they called for permission to go outside the gate to investigate. The on-duty flight chief responded and allowed 3 patrolmen to proceed on foot. The individuals reported seeing a strange glowing object in the forest. The object was described as being metallic in appearance and triangular in shape, approximately 2 or 3 meters across the base and approximately 2 meters high. It illuminated the entire forest with a white light. The object itself had a pulsing red light on top and a bank, and in parentheses S, or banks of blue lights underneath. The object was hovering or on legs. As the patrolman approached the object, it maneuvered through the trees and disappeared. At this time, the animals on a nearby farm went into a frenzy. The object was briefly sighted approximately an hour later near the back gate. Number 2. The next day, 3 depressions 1.5 inches deep and 7 inches in diameter were found where the object had been sighted on the ground. The following night, 27 December 1980, the area was checked for radiation. Beta/gamma readings of 0.1. I'm going to be honest with you, it's very hard to read this part of it. Milliroentgens. And I could be wrong with that. Some of you science guys out there are probably laughing at me. I'm trying to read it, and it's a little unreadable on my copy. There might be a better copy out there. But beta/gamma readings of 0.1 were recorded with peak readings in the 3 depressions and near the center of the triangle formed by the depressions. A nearby tree had moderate 0.05 to 0.07 readings on the side of the tree toward the depressions. Later in the night, this is paragraph number 3. Later in the night, a red, sun-like light was seen through the trees. It moved about and pulsed. At one point, it appeared to throw off glowing particles and then broke into 5 separate white objects and then disappeared. Immediately thereafter, 3 star-like objects were noticed in the sky, 2 objects to the north and 1 to the south, all of which were about 10 degrees off the horizon. The objects moved rapidly in sharp, angular movements and displayed red, green, and blue lights. The objects to the north appeared to be elliptical through an 8 to 12 power lens. They then turned to full circles. The objects to the north remained in the sky for an hour or more. The object to the south was visible for 2 or 3 hours and beamed down a stream of light from time to time. Numerous individuals, including the undersigned, witnessed the activities in paragraphs 2 and 3. That's signed Deputy Base Commander Charles Halt, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force. I thought it worthwhile to go ahead and give you guys an audio representation of that. Again, I totally botched whatever that word is. I didn't want to guess. And again, there may be a better copy. This was the one that was furnished to me, again, by the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense under the Freedom of Information Act. So I thought we'd go ahead and add that into the show. Compare that to the testimony of Mr. John Burroughs. I do believe John is very honest with what he saw, and he's honest with what he doesn't know. He's also very honest that there are discrepancies. He offered that up, and I didn't have to push him to get that out. I admire that, because a lot of times people want to avoid the fact that there are discrepancies in stories, whether that be just human brains interpreting something a different way, or quite possibly somebody is fabricating something. Who knows? I will let all of you listening decide. But what was really interesting to me was, number 1, the traceable and documented struggle that John had with his medical records, which, okay, may have been a coincidence, but that's a pretty big coincidence. What happened in John's military career that created a classified portion of his medical records that he had so much struggle trying to access? And why did his part of his military career disappear? That's another really big question. But lastly, an official document written by the lieutenant colonel at the time, Charles Halt, completely contradicts what appears to be the documented and recollected facts by the witnesses themselves. Why were the dates changed, and why were there discrepancies on this official document as well? I think the Rendlesham Forest Incident will have a lot of questions for a long time, but I do thank John Burroughs for his long-standing service in the United States Air Force. I really do respect the men and women in our military, and whatever did happen to John, in regards to his health, I do wish him the absolute best. I hope the VA does take care of him, and I am glad that the late Senator John McCain got personally involved to show his support for a military veteran to get the health care that they deserve. Regardless of what happened to John, it is a bizarre circumstance and one that was definitely worthy of a show. So thanks again to John Burroughs for really telling his story. And obviously, when you get into people's health issues, especially your own, it's a sensitive area and probably uncomfortable. And yet John meets it head on, and he tells us all about it because he does see a connection there. And he does think that that is part of the story. So a lot of respect for John for coming forward, telling us all. I will let you all decide what you think about the story. Feel free to add your comments to wherever you are listening, be it on YouTube or iTunes or wherever. I appreciate those ratings, the comments. Feel free to jump into discussions where you might see this posted. I do appreciate it. And thank you all for listening. This is John Greenewald Jr. signing off. We'll see you next time.